Why do some images feel like art? I went back to tunnel view at Yosemite with my homemade pinhole camera to photograph a place I had already photographed many times before. I wanted to see what would happen when I experienced a familiar scene through a completely different kind of camera. Unlike a normal camera, a pinhole camera captures a scene through a tiny pinhole instead of a lens, which creates an image that is soft and atmospheric. I thought this was just going to be a simple pinhole photograph, a way to revisit an old place through a different process. But somewhere between the exposure, the film, and the scans, this one moment turned into 5 very different images. And the more I worked with them, the more this became about what making art actually is for me. Before we get into the images, let me take you back to the morning they were made. Hey everyone, this is Hayata. We are here in Oakhurst. Oh, it is Oakhurst, right? Yeah. Hey everyone, we are here in Oakhurst, California. It's about 30 minutes away from Yosemite National Park, but it is about an hour and a half away from Tunnel View, which is the iconic viewpoint here at Yosemite, and that's where I want to get this pinhole photo. Now, it's about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. It's gonna take about an hour and a half to get there. I'm not trying to get sunrise, right? But I want to get there early enough to kind of beat the crowds. So here we are at the famous Tunnel View. I've moved off to the side to get away from a bunch of people. I guess I didn't really take a look here, because I didn't really avoid the crowds. Now, in terms of the pinhole photography, we are right in the sun. Yeah, I haven't been here at this time of year, and I didn't realize the sun would be like right in front of us. It makes it for a cool scene, but gotta make the exposure tough. Hi there again. A few days later, I got these 2 scans back from the lab. Here is the first one. I like it. It is definitely underexposed, but there is still something about it that reminds me of why I keep coming back to pinhole photography. Pinhole just sees differently. The edges are softer, the light spreads a little more, and details start blending into larger shapes. If you compare it to the digital photo I took that same morning, you can really see it. Look at El Capitan. In the digital image, everything feels very separated. The granite face stands out with all its texture and detail. But in the pinhole version, it feels different. The surface smooths out, the outline softens, and it becomes less about describing the mountain exactly. It is more about giving you an impression of it. That is what I like about pinhole. It leaves a little more open for the viewer to work through. It asks something of you. And I think that is part of why some images feel more like art than others. Then there is this one that really sends me down the rabbit hole. When I first saw it, I stopped. It did not feel like the same place at all. Everything has this strange green cast. Even the shadows on El Capitan have it. And I remember liking it right away, even though I knew something was off. It felt almost right, just not quite right. And that tension was what made it interesting. The darker image shows me what pinhole naturally does. This one feels like something more is happening. It is almost like the process itself is starting to reinterpret the landscape. At first, I assumed I had just underexposed it. When I was standing there that morning, I realized I had read the light meter wrong. But by then it was too late. I could do nothing about it. So when this came back from the lab, I figured I was probably just looking at that mistake being pushed even further by the scan. That is when I started wondering what was actually in the negative. This is why rescanning mattered. I was always planning to scan these again myself anyway. I digitized my negatives by photographing them with a digital camera over a light source. This gives me a more detailed file and lets me make finer adjustments later. What I really wanted to know was whether that green color was actually sitting in there in the negative, or whether it was something introduced later when the lab scanned it. So this is my first rescan, and right away it feels completely different. The color settles down, and suddenly it feels much closer to something believable. I can also tell the exposure is not nearly as broken as I first thought, because the border around the negative is still black. This tells me that this was not just a failed exposure being stretched back to life. Something around the lab's scanning process was causing that green result. That was the moment I realized the same negative could lead to very different images depending on how it was interpreted. And once I saw that, I wanted to keep pushing. So I scanned it one more time. And this is the one that really stopped me. It was the first time I had that feeling of, okay, there's really something here. The earthy brown tones changed everything. And the light started feeling luminous. The whole image reminded me of those old Yosemite paintings from the Hudson River School. But the green image still has a strange pull to it. It is disruptive in a way I like. But this one felt like it was holding together differently. It still had that interpretive quality, but it felt more resolved. At this point, I was not really thinking about accuracy anymore. I was just looking at all 5 versions and asking myself which one I like best. The digital image has its appeal. It is sharp, clear, and immediate, and I completely understand why this is the version many people would naturally connect with. But the brown version kept pulling me back, and the green one pushes the scene somewhere strange. The brown one holds on to some of that strangeness, but it also feels more unified. This is the conflict I'm always chasing. Part of me wants the image to be disruptive. Another part still wants it to feel emotionally accessible. Something people can settle into before they start asking questions. A lot of my work seems to live somewhere in that space between disruption and resolution. The final test was cropping all 5 into panoramas. When I did that, the brown version held together best, even though I darkened it a little bit. This version can survive different presentations. This is one that is most me. That gets to the bigger question. Why do some images feel like art? I think people want there to be a formula for that. I do too. It would be nice if making art was just visualizing it in your head, making it, and moving on. That is just not how it works for me. For me, it usually turns into a rabbit hole. Something unexpected shows up, something feels unresolved, or strange, or interesting, and instead of moving on, I keep following it. That is where the real work usually starts. There is this idea that great artists always knew exactly what they were making from the beginning. But when you look at studies, revisions, and unfinished versions from master painters, you realize they were discovering the work as they went too. That is what happened here. I went to Yosemite thinking I was making one straightforward pinhole photograph of a place I already knew. Instead, I ended up with 5 different readings of the same moment. And somewhere in all of that, I found the one that feels most like my own work. That is what making art is for me. It is not about forcing an image into existence. It is about paying attention when the process opens a door you were not expecting, and being willing to follow it. Hey there, thanks for watching my video. You saw my camera stand in it. Click here to learn why I built it.